everybody and welcome back to another video. This week we're going to be talking through some of the secrets of batch painting these Imperial Guard Cadian shock troops. I recently asked a friend of mine, Stylus from the Winters SEO Discord, what he'd like to see on the channel, and he said he'd like to know more about batch painting. So here we are. This guide is by no means a catch-all, but I'll go over the main things that I use to help me get through large squads in a fairly timely manner. My first one is making sure that wherever possible the base coat I'm using is the primary colour of the armour. So in this case I'm using an airbrush to add Panzer Grey to my guys. I'm then doing a quick zenithal with some Panzer Grey mixed with AK's Silver Grey. Jumping straight to the next tip, you need some good paints. Games Workshop makes some really good blacks, reds, a few blues here and there, and they're high pigment, so you only need one, maybe 1.5 coats in most places. Having a solid base coat is going to save you so much time. For example, I swear by Black Legion, which is Games Workshop's contrast paint, specifically designed to put down an opaque black layer. Likewise, the reds are really good in this manner and make things so simple for you. So where you can get it down in one coat, do so. Base coating is likely, when you're batch painting anyway, going to be the part you spend the longest amount of time on. So having good paints is really important, but so is having good brushes. These brushes are actually really cheap. I use them all the time. They're from a shop in the UK called The Works. They're not really branded, they're kind of a homegrown thing, but they're really good, and the reason they're good is because they keep their tip and also hold a lot of paint in the belly, which is the wider part of the brush. Pigment heavy paints and good brushes will see you through the base coating stage. The important thing to know is that it's still not a massively quick process. These guys took me 5 or 6 hours to complete, start to finish, not including the building time. But I'm hoping these tips will help you in a small way get through that next squad, or maybe even grab a few new paints to help you get through that next squad. You won't believe how much easier things are with a good brush and good paints. Another important thing to save time is to do all the colours at the beginning that every model has. So in this case, the greys, blacks, browns, metallics. Then you have to start jumping around, so grenades, teacups, ropes in this case. These are going to take a little bit of time, but generally they're a little bit more fun. That's more than enough base coating. Let's talk quickly about washes and shades. Again, you want to go through all the shades that every model has first, and then if there are any unique ones, you do them after the fact. Another extra tip is that contrast paints, when slightly thinned, make even better shades than the Games Workshop shade range. I think they have a lot more pigment attached and they're really nice in the final effect. However, nothing beats Nuln Oil for metallics. Now with the shades done, we can move on to highlighting. At this point, you're well over halfway, especially if you highlight in the same way I do. I'm using an edge highlighting method here, which can be time consuming, but you only need to do one highlight per item. You can also, of course, use dry brushing if you wish, and that'll work just the same. I like a nice clean highlight as it adds a ton of contrast, and I'm also skipping a few layers here, going straight to one of my brighter highlights. If you're a little bit confused by what I mean, I'll hand back to Pa Sam to explain. So what I mean when I'm saying I'm skipping highlights is usually you have an order. So let's say our base layer is corn red. Normally your next highlight or layer will be Evil Sun Scarlet or something equivalent. And then you'll have a second, sometimes you can go third, fourth, but in this case you'll have a second brighter highlight, usually for those pinpoint areas, in this case often Wild Rider Red. All I'm doing is skipping out the second layer step and going straight to a bright highlight. If you keep it neat, it will look really good. If you start going a bit messy, then that's where it can go a bit wrong. So you need some brush control to do this, but that's something you're going to learn as you paint anyway, and you may already have. Another good example is when you're doing something from black. So Black Legion, there's no room to put shades in here, so you're immediately going to highlight. So how you highlight is important. The normal step up would probably be something like Eshin Grey, which is quite a dark grey and gives a nice step gradient. And then you've got Dawnstone as your brighter highlight. In this scheme that you've been seeing, I've been skipping the Eshin Grey and going straight to Dawnstone. That basically makes things much faster for me and also gives a really nice stark contrast. Again, the caveat being is that you've got to be somewhat neat with it. Everything about this is always about contrast. Whenever you're painting, you're trying to make those contrasting colours. So if you can skip a step when you're batch painting to make things a little bit easier and appear a bit more bright and highlighted, then you're doing yourself a favour. Plus, I personally really like the effect. Great, so that's why I'm skipping highlights. Another time saver is using the same highlight colour for a few areas. I don't recommend doing this all the time as it can make the model look a little bit monotone, but in this case I was using Dawnstone for both the grey armour and the black fatigues. Now the same rules we applied with the base coats apply for the highlights as well. Also the shades for that matter. Basically whatever everybody has, do first. So everybody has black fatigues, everybody has grey armour. I did all the grey highlights first. Everybody also has leather accents, so I'm going to highlight all the leather next. After that, you work down bit by bit, getting smaller and smaller. A good example of this is the grenades that most of the minis, but not all, are carrying. After that, we move on to little things like the few who have faces, the few that have flasks, and so on. Little accents that are unique to each model. By the time you get to this stage, you should feel that you're on a downward slope, because these are the final steps prior to basing. It can also feel like you're just desperately trying to get over the finish line, depending on the size of the squad that you do. For that matter, when coming to batch painting, my final, and probably what should have maybe been first tip, is to choose the size of your squad carefully. Don't start doing 10-person squads if you can help it. 5-person squads are equally good. For example, if I did this in a 5 and then another 5 method, it would be a little bit slower overall, but I'd probably feel better knowing I've completed something in between. After that, all it is a matter of basing in whatever method you chose. I'm doing the basing at the end here, but you could do it at the start if you wanted, if you're going to paint the base. There's no rule about it whatsoever. And with that, that'll be the end of the video. I hope that's been helpful to some of you, and maybe a bit of a refresher on batch painting for those of you who might have been flagging. As always, I've been Sam. See you next time.